Hey guys, welcome back to Let Me Be Bold. And I want to actually start today off with a little announcement. I am going to change the name of the podcast from Let Me Be Bold to Let's Be Bold. I think one of the things that I have realized over the past few weeks is that these conversations that I am having is something that is not just what I'm experiencing specifically. And if you are new here, one of the things that I do at the end of every episode is to actually challenge you to do something that week where you can exercise and practice your boldness. And because of the communal nature of these conversations, instead of the focus being like me and my life stories and what I'm doing out in the world that is practicing boldness, I'm going to change the name to Let's Be Bold. And it is something that is inclusive and it becomes a shared collective activity. So I wanted to start today talking about that change. What we are going to be talking about today is the book on being a 20-something, part 2. Last week we had conversations around the things that have come up, at least during my time in my 20s, that would have been nice if someone else was like, hey, this is something that you might experience. And I know that a part of that is generations before us haven't necessarily had to interact on things like dating apps and stuff like that. And so this week I wanted to continue those conversations by including a few more things that are on this ever-growing list of things that I've experienced and one of my best friends have experienced through our 20s. Today specifically, we are going to talk about when did making friends get hard and when you expect there to be an example and there is no example. Akotako. So, starting with when did making friends get hard, I have been asking myself the question of how have I been able to build a friend group in a support system post-college, especially moving out of my home state. And this is something that I want you guys to be thinking about too. And I know that it's something that has been a struggle, especially in recent years as we are in another year of a pandemic and social interactions. Like we've been trying to keep things consistent and it's been stop and go and it's just hard to know. So here is my story. I was a very social person on my college campus. I was involved in a lot of activities. I pledged, I volunteered, I was involved in my church. I knew a lot of people. It was a lot. So when I graduated undergrad, a lot of my friends left campus because they were done with their time there, and I decided to stay and continue in a graduate program. And my graduate program existed in a cohort, and so there was kind of a built-in community of people that I could engage with while I was there. And I also was still able to engage in the church that I had been attending up to that point. And I had a job. So there was lots of point of connection, even after undergraduate graduation, where I could make friends easily. When I graduated graduate school and moved back home, it was a thing of like, well, what I know about this place was experiences with my high school friends who I haven't necessarily been in touch with while I was away in college. And so it was one of those things of like, I could maybe reach out on Facebook, but also it's been like 6 years. That's a little awkward. And then, of course, if you've listened to earlier episodes in my story, after moving back home, I decided to move to Colorado. And so when I stepped into this new environment in Colorado, I did have people that I knew here. Like I said before, there was a couple people from my graduate cohort who also moved here. So I knew them. But outside of my job, my coworkers, there wasn't people that I knew. And so that was a really challenging experience for me because I've always just known a lot of people. December of 2018 was the first birthday that I spent here in Colorado, and it was my 25th birthday, and it was hard because I wasn't with my family. I didn't really have friends and community like that to celebrate my birthday with. My coworkers did take me out for a birthday lunch, so that was really fun. But what I chose to do instead was to go to Boulder for my 25th birthday, and I just spent the weekend with myself, got a hotel room, went on some hikes. I love hiking, and went to restaurants. I went to this fancy tea place out in Boulder, and I just had a good time by myself. However, as I am an extroverted individual, there's always so much time that I can spend by myself before it starts impacting me negatively. I get more anxious when I'm by myself for long periods of time. There's maybe like negative thoughts that come in. And so I needed to find my people. So I invested in my coworkers, and I've got some really good relationships with my coworkers. And the other thing that I did was church hop. I went to a lot of different churches, and living in Colorado, which is not in the Bible Belt, after spending time living in Texas, which is in the Bible Belt, it was really interesting engaging in churches because things just look differently here than they did in the South. And eventually I did find a church community. And as I kind of waded into that space, started serving on the welcome team and meeting people that way, in 2020, the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic settled in to our society, I had only been here for, 2018, 2019. I'd only been here for about 14 or 15 months. That is not a super long time in a new state to have joined community. So in January of 2020, me and my best friend who lives up here, we started a city group for 20s and 30 somethings, and we got to engage in that group for about 5-ish weeks before everything shut down, and then we were on Zoom. And the opportunities and the potential for group hangs and going out to dinner or spending time on a group hike or game nights, all of that stuff just went away. And of course, like being in a new place, you throw in like trying to date on top of that. And I didn't want to engage in dating as soon as I moved here, because I was like, okay, I need to have my core friends first. I didn't want it to be a situation where I found somebody that I was dating and then I spent all my time with the person that I was dating, not having friends outside of that. So that wasn't something that I invested in early on during my time here. And all of a sudden the possibility of that was gone too. And I am not a huge fan of dating apps. And so that kind of became the only option. And so it was hard. It was definitely hard. As things have continued to open up more and we've got safety things in place, wearing a mask, vaccinations became available. So then people felt more comfortable engaging in socially. I started to spend more time with people who were in my city group in person. And it wasn't really until city group launch in fall of 2021 where I finally started to settle and be like, oh my goodness, like this group is really great. Some of them I'd known for almost 2 years. A lot of them were brand new people to Colorado and to our church and to our group. And we were engaging in game nights, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. There's actually people to hang out with. But by the time 2021 happened, I had been here for 3 years. And for anyone who is out there who are struggling with connecting in community, I know that church is not everyone's thing. And if you're in a new environment, sometimes you just have to give things time. Like I said, it was about 3 years before I started to realize, like, wow, I have found people to hang out with, and that's been really cool. The other thing that I did a lot was to try new things. And volunteered for things. I said yes to a lot of different opportunities around church, and so now I know quite a few people at my church. It actually surprises me sometimes when I'm like, wow, I know this person, and I know this person, and I know this person, and it's like, I don't even know how this happened, but I just said yes to a lot of things. The other things that I have found is there's this cool app called Meet or Meetup, one of those, and there you can like go through and click your interest, and it can be like dance, it can be art, etc. And so now I get notifications of like, oh, such and such event is taking place. I've joined a lot of groups that are around Black and Brown activities, just trying to find people of color in this space. And so it's really cool. A lot of those are still on Zoom, but it's really cool to be able to realize like, wow, there are other options of connecting with people. I have like gone out on dates and tried new things. There was one date that I went on with a guy who was super into rock climbing, and I did not have a lot of experience with rock climbing, so I went and did rock climbing with him, and that was really fun. So saying yes to new things and you know, spending time driving around and just talking to people, I have found ways to get more connected into the community. So that is what that has looked like for me. The other thing about being a 20-something that no one has necessarily like taught about is you expect there to be an example for things going forward. And here's what I mean by that. I spent my entire life essentially until I was about 24 in school. I went to pre-K, then elementary school, middle school, high school. They spent a whole lot of energy thinking through a degree plan, what action steps I have to take in order to get to my long-term goal. Of course, I changed my major during college, but that's a different conversation. And so the action plan changed, the degree plan changed, and you graduate from college, enter into the real world, and all of a sudden, I am like, what is the degree plan? And I know that it's like a weird concept to maybe think about adulthood having a degree plan, but that is what I was socialized to think about. The future is like you have all of these things to get through your educational career, and then there is not a parallel equivalent in the adult world. And one of the things that I have learned from about myself, and then also my therapist likes to remind me of this from time to time, is it seems that as I've gone through my adulthood and I'm like, oh, I want to do this, or even moving to Colorado, which I did, there seems to be an element of like, I feel like I need permission to be able to do these things. And I don't actually ask permission when I'm out doing these things, but I'm so used to getting feedback. You know, if you want to squeeze an extra class in for a semester, someone has to sign off on it. Somebody has to give feedback to that. Getting advice about what courses to take, or there's all of these on-campus events, and you work with your friends and connect with your friends about, okay, which one of these events are we going to hit up? Are we going to hit all of them? Are we going to hit some of them? There's a lot of communal feedback that happens before you're fully into adulthood. And I moved out here, and all of a sudden there was less communal feedback about what I needed to do. So that is what I mean about realizing there is no degree plan. I have had conversations with friends around getting your first job, for example. And a part of those conversations is like, how do you know when it's time to leave your first job? In this generation, it is not super common for someone to get the job right out of college or right out of high school and then stay with that job for, 40 years. My dad is one of those people. He, back in September, got his 30-year plaque at UPS. He knew that he wanted to work there. He started working there when he was 18, and 30 years later, that is where he still works. And that is just not what you see these days. And so even as I recently was making the decision of like, okay, I've been at this job for 3+ years. There are other things that I want to be doing that I feel like I can in this job. How do you start taking those steps towards finding a new job or investing in something new like podcasting? And there's not predetermined careers or like courses that you can take that will get you where you're going. So we're all just out here trying to figure it out. If I've learned anything, it is that a lot of adulthood is just taking things step by step and figuring things out as you go. And that is not to say that you can't plan ahead. I've just learned that as I have planned ahead, things tend to not work out the way that I perceive them in my head. And especially in these pandemic years, I've really had to focus on being present where I am instead of trying to figure out what things are going to look like 2 or 3 steps ahead of me. Some of that is because I'm an Enneagram 7. I don't know if you guys know much about the Enneagram, but 7s, we love excitement, we love to travel, and so being in a pandemic, a lot of those opportunities feel like they were taken away from me, and traveling just feels less safe. And so me looking forward to things that could come is not something that it's something that I can do right now, but it's something that it wouldn't necessarily be the wisest for me to spend a lot of energy doing. So being present in where I am, being present in connecting with the people that I'm able to connect with, enjoying my group, enjoying my dog, those kinds of things, and learning more about what sparks fire in me, trying new things. It's not necessarily a degree plan, but it is a part of what it means to live freely. And I'm here for living freely and for discovering what my own boundaries are versus, okay, like here are the boundaries that someone is giving me, which is also something that you would find in college of like, here's boundaries that you're given, you have to stay within these boundaries. That's lame. Sometimes necessary, but being able to learn and create your own boundaries is something that I've definitely been able to learn in my 20s. So my challenge for y'all this week is to say yes to everything this week. Now, for clarification, I definitely don't want you to say yes to things that make you uncomfortable or to say yes to things that go against like your core belief system. That's not what I mean at all. But if someone asks you like, hey, I want to try this new restaurant, and maybe it's not the type of food that you really vibe with, or, you know, it's not chicken tenders. I eat chicken tenders a lot. Say yes to trying that new restaurant. It could be something that you enjoy, or it could, like, you never know. Or if you are involved in a church and someone says, hey, would you mind helping with the students ministry a couple times a month? Say yes. because teenagers are cool. I work with teenagers, but also you will meet other people who are also serving in that ministry and who are passionate about loving and pouring into teenagers. So that is what I mean by saying yes to things. And you will be surprised what you learn about yourself in that process. So until next week, guys, go out and live your best, boldest life.